Ladies and gentlemen, it is July 21st, 2022. I am Matt Bilinsky. This is your weekly dose of sanity, the prevailing narrative, and I hope you guys were able to stay sane the last few weeks while I was away. Yes, I was traveling a bit, so no episodes. A lot happened in my absence, a lot of stuff around the abortion issue. There's going to be no shortage of stuff to analyze and current events and newsworthy topics to attack, but we're going to push that to next week. This week, I'm having a conversation with a fascinating individual named Kamal Ravikant. So this podcast, beyond kind of fierce analysis of current events, is meant to bring you some of the best thought leaders and most insightful minds out there, and Kamal is certainly one of them. Very successful founder and investor in Silicon Valley for many years now, but also a thought leader and a successful best-selling author. His book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, has changed lives many times over and is kind of one of the really most popular and impactful personal development, self-help screeds over the past decade. And what really strikes me about Kamal, and this is also not just from his writing, but also just from having met him a few times, is how open, honest, and engaging he is and raw. And a gentleman, historical figure and author that we'll be discussing on the pod chat with Kamal is Ernest Hemmingway. And Ernest Hemingway had a famous quote that writing is very simple. You just sit down at your typewriter and bleed. And the notion being that you have to you have to overshare. You have to, however much you think you are hesitant or scared to share about yourself, your hopes, your fears, your desires, your experiences, you have to share more. And that is it, to let yourself out in the most raw, vulnerable manner possible. That brings and that results in the best writing, and that is what Kamal has brought to bear with his work as well. A super interesting guy, and in the hopes and the goals of bringing you guys the best thought leaders and the most helpful, valuable information possible. It's a fascinating discussion. Kamal is a great and fascinating guy. We talk about everything from the principles and experiences that gave rise to his career as a best-selling author, his thoughts on the business world, the startup world, and the cryptocurrency world, which he's very involved in as well. And just a fascinating guy whose experiences, he's tried to live a life of excitement and challenge, and his wisdom and his perspective definitely shows that. So the conversation with Kamal Ravikant coming up in just a moment. Great to be back with you guys. Hope you enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Matt Bilinsky. This is The Prevailing Narrative. The competition for most interesting man in the world is fierce, and my guest today is definitely in the conversation. He's co-founded numerous companies, meditated with monks in the Himalayas, gone through basic training with the U.S. Army at 18 years old, walked across the country of Spain, and changed thousands of lives with his best-selling book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. Kamal Ravikant, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. That's the most interesting man in the world. That's funny.
That profile, you're definitely in the conversation. Your hat's in the ring.
I do get that. I find it very comical. I would say actually the most curious man in the world. I'm insanely curious, and I think that's what leads me to do all these crazy things.
So right into that, the being interesting is being interested. It was, if we're tracing it back to kind of one of the early self-improvement or personal development texts, Dale Carnegie. I imagine that you find that lesson rings true.
Yeah, look, I was thinking, if you want to have friends, you got to be curious about people. If you have curious about people, you'll never lack for friends. Mm-hmm. And then if you're curious about people and you're open about yourself, you will never lack for deep friendships.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And in terms of being open with yourself, that seems to be one of your core principles. And in terms of the genesis of your career as an author and thought leader and your book, that it really is about sharing and then oversharing about your personal experiences and getting past that boundary of hesitation to share your innermost thoughts, fears, beliefs, and ideas. Is really getting past that is really what led you to your fate destiny has rolled out over the last decade. Yeah,
I trained as a classical fiction writer.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I was going to do. I was going to write literary fiction. So when I wrote Love Yourself, I had never set out to write a book like that. And I wrote it because I had something to share. And because now I had the skill and the craft to be able to share the truth simply, I think that really helped. But what really made the book successful, I think, is the fact that I truly share. Look, I'm just a human being. My mind's it's probably more of a shit show than yours. But here's how I basically trained it, and here's how it changed my life, and here's exactly how you can do it. And I'm not a fan of people who write their journals and put them out to the world. It doesn't help anyone. You got to show, there's got to be a method to the madness. You got to show what the lesson is and how you got there. Not just, well, this is my sucky past. There you go. Have a great time. No,
Hmm.
this is what happened. This is what I did to get through it. And this is how I'm on the other side living it. So you can follow that path. That's the best gift we can give as human beings is share our journeys and share the path so others can take them and also realize they're not alone. A
Hmm.
lot of people get, when all of us have been there, when we're stuck in a funk or a dark place, it feels very alone. And
Yeah.
it really helps to understand that people who we consider successful or whatever out there go through the same stuff, if not worse. The more driven you are, the more you go through that. That's a lot of people forget that it's part of. So some of the very most successful people I know have had to work on themselves really hard because they
Hmm.
were shit shows. Their lives are shit shows. They have to really do that. And so when you share that, people realize, oh, I'm not alone. I'm just another human being, than another human being. And if they got through it, and this is how they did it, I can do it.
Hmm.
Then it's worthwhile to share.
And a related observation that I saw you made is that your life went from an incredibly dark place to an incredibly bright place very quickly. And that's something, if we, once again, for some reason, going back to kind of classical personal development texts and Think and Grow Rich, and one of their chapters is on how some of the most successful people out there, their real breakthroughs came after an immense tragedy or some of their darker periods. And that seems to ring true. I mean, do you think that's something that's translatable, that a lot of people, they need to see that it's possible, and even oftentimes occurs, that your darkest periods are followed by the true breakthroughs?
I think it's kind of like because what dark periods bring through. Like normally, if life is just going as status quo, we just kind of get caught up in it. We all do that. We just get lazy, fat and lazy, and just get caught up in it. Or if the things are going great, we're just busy enjoying it. But when things are really bad is when two things. One, either you can get in there and wallow in it and just dig your well deeper, or at the same time, you're forced to reflect and you're forced to be really honest with yourself, like in ways that you normally aren't. And when you're really honest with yourself is when you make the true changes. And unfortunately, that often comes during dark periods because they force us to look at ourselves from our, um, like hospital bed decisions are very clear and life changing decisions. Why is
Hmm.
that? I've had those, and like, let me tell you, when you're in a hospital bed, the conversations you have with yourself are, there's, there's a purity to it that nothing matches.
That'll
You
sharpen your
know,
focus, no doubt.
well, not just your focus, you're just really honest with you. So when they're telling you you might die next week, you're like,
Hmm.
okay, let me get, it's not even like, oh, let me get honest. Your thoughts get really clear.
Hmm.
Like the gun falls away, right? And it's the same with dark periods. You just get honest with yourself. And when you're honest with yourself and you reflect, you naturally come to conclusions and then the next step is just living them. And those that do are the ones that transform their lives.
And so, interesting, a serendipitous moment related to this conversation. I was checking out some of your materials, noticed that we have a mutual friend, Alan Loeb, one of the top screenwriters in
Oh
Hollywood.
yeah, Alan's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. Listen to your podcast with Alan, was fantastic. Loved hearing his origination story, but obviously one of the principles of that chat was the power of storytelling. So your story, what occurred to you that led you to the place that at which you were forced to be honest with yourself. It was, as you described, a very low point. You made these breakthroughs, and while you've been a successful founder, executive, investor, that your true craft and what you're truly passionate about is being an author, and what led you to that point. Well, would love to hear the origination story there.
Well, the original story, it's funny. I've been asked this so many times. I've said it so many times, and I wonder, in the end, rather than going into the details of it, because it's in the book, in
Sure.
the end, what it was, what you have a human being, you have a man who's very tied, his ego is very tied into what he does,
Hmm.
and the whole thing blows up. It could be anything in life where something we're tied to blows up. It could be an athlete, it could be your career ends, whatever. Like my whole thing blew up, and so did my sense of self along with it, and I fell into a dark hole. And it was a dark hole that I considered just ending things. And it was a very, and but what I decided was it was in that time, in that moment of reflection, where I realized, you know what? I don't want to live like this anymore. I'm sick of being in my own head. I was literally sick of my own thoughts. And you can't escape your head. I mean, you can do drugs and stuff, but that's momentary, and that just leads to a shitty, shitty
Yeah.
spiral, right? It doesn't get
Yeah.
it. That's not the solution. In fact, it creates more problems. So, or alcohol for that matter, right? You can numb it, but then you just like playing whack-a-mole and you're destroying yourself in the process. So I just like, I'm sick of these thoughts, and I'm gonna change my insight or die trying. I can't live like this anymore. And in that process, I came up with I made a vow to myself, and I'm a big believer in, if you make a vow, you got to keep it. I'm a big believer. One of the things I pride myself in as a man is like, if I give my word, I keep it. It's just like, I think as a human being, forget as a man, we should have certain principles that we live by that make us who we are, that make us proud of who we are. That whether anyone ever sees it, we live it, like our values, and that's one of mine. And I made this vow to myself, and it came out of actually nowhere. I thought it was going to be like, I'm going to be my best self. I'm proving it came out of, I'm going to love myself. And it came out in the moment, and I thought, and I wrote this down, and I thought, how the hell do I do that? And so, unlike a guy who's written a book on it, I didn't go around looking for books on it, because honestly, like a lot of self-help I found is perfunctory. It'll make you feel good in the moment, but it won't give you the hard solution. It's like telling someone, how great it is to be fit, but not giving them a core diet and fitness plan that they can implement.
Nothing
right?
actionable. Yeah, not
Right.
actionable.
So coming from the life I've had, I believe in action. So I just started trying things. But now this wasn't external, because I was in a pretty bad state at the time. It was all internal work. And I noticed, that what started to work started to shift things inside. And so I went deeper and did those more and more, until eventually I came up with a very simple practice, and that I was just doing daily, and it was an internal practice. And my shitty thoughts went away. They're replaced by like really like a beautiful. I was enjoying my own head, and it actually then translated into a beautiful life. And the irony is, I came up with and I'm the one who gets lazy and forgets it, which is one of the reasons why I have a whole section and Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, on just really hammering, don't coast. It's like, if work, you get really fit, and then you sit there and eat bonbons for a year, what do you think's going to happen? Right? The mind actually is even faster, because neuroplasticity, it's always growing, it's always taking things in, and your old grooves are still there, and they will kick in if you just get lazy, fat and lazy. And I use the word fat and lazy metaphorically,
Sure.
mental. So that's what I set out to write, to actually share. And what was amazing was, this was one man's story. It wasn't like I have a PhD in neuroscience or whatever. I'm actually better off that I don't. I just did my own thing, right? And there's a Roman poet who thousands of years ago said, "I'm a human being, therefore nothing human is foreign to me." And I never forgot that, because I heard Maya Angelou say that in a talk I heard her give years ago. And I thought, that kind of like inspired me, because if I'm a human being and nothing human is foreign to me, so if one human being can change his inside by doing work on the inside, so can another. Here's the path. Here's where I was. Here's the path I took. And here's a step-by-step journey that you can replicate. And it turns out it works for a ton of people all around the world. This book is doing very well. Just reach out to me every day from it's published in, like, I don't know, 18 languages by now, right? I know I have to use my Google Translate every day, like when I check my email, and all over the world that it works for them. I am a human being, therefore nothing human is foreign to me. And so all I did was share one man's human journey, an internal journey, and his solution that he found that worked for him. And I wrote it down.
Fantastic. And it does seem to be resonating with people on such a primitive and cellular level. And it's also interesting that it's a very simple book. It's relatively short. It's relatively simple. And you've extolled the virtues of brevity. And the quote, I would write you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. And Matt, you seem, in the way that you've described the craft of writing, is real value in every word, and essentially chiseling things down to the utmost necessity. How do you see that as a value of writing in general, and particularly as applied towards any type of personal development screeds, or something where you're revealing something about yourself in hopes to bond with others?
Yeah, it's actually funny enough. I wrote a little note to myself. I was in the gym before I came here, and I was thinking about something I heard I think it was YouTube, this fitness guy, Cape Rogues, really great calisthenics teacher. And he says, chase form, don't chase reps. He keeps on saying, don't chase reps. And I wrote to myself, yeah, don't, and I was doing pull-ups. I was doing perfect form. And I was like, and I felt it was a lot less pull-ups than I can normally do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But the workload was much better, much greater on my body.
Yep.
And, I wrote to myself, don't chase reps, chase perfection of form, which in other words, quality over quantity. And that applies to everything, including the written word, quality over quantity. Every word has to serve a purpose. Every chapter has to serve a story. Every paragraph has to serve the chapter. It's a true craft. It involves a lot of work, but when you do it, you get through, you'll write something that'll stand the test of time. You'll write stuff that I have kids who read my books, and I have, people in the 80s who read my books, and all are transformed by it. Why? Because I write so simply. And Hemingway, I studied obsessively, and he was like, never use a big word when you can use a small word. Yeah. He was absolutely right, because using big words to basically hide a concept, it's much harder to actually explain a concept with using smaller words than just using one blanket word. But that's how people will understand what you're really trying to say, because one big word can mean a lot of different things to someone. But when you really hammer and chisel down what you're trying to say with small words, the same thing, you will get through exactly what you want people to understand.
No doubt.
So that applies, perfection versus chasing reps applies to everything.
So in terms of a simple word that really is the focus of your book and your personal credo is love. And then people hear that, the notion of loving oneself sounds great, right? But as you've harped on, the practical application, it is there. There's a process to loving yourself. And you've shared some of this in the book, but what does loving oneself mean to you, kind of, both philosophically, but also functionally?
Look, I was never the guy who set out to be the love yourself guy. Trust me, I was dragged into this kicking and screaming. I was never wanted to be that guy. But somehow I've become that guy. But I'm still kicking and screaming about it. Because for me, it's an internal thing. It's not shouting out to the world it's about inner work and how I feel about myself inside. And that's a lot of times, most of us, it's the human condition, feel pretty shitty about ourselves inside. The classic thing, would you let a friend talk to you the way you talk to yourself? Well, it requires work to change that. And that's what I'm practicing. But it was very, very simple. It wasn't like stand your head, write this 50 times a day, all that. There's none of that. It's just very simple. You can do anytime. It's just mental work. And when you do that, you're creating these new loops in your mind that stuff. So for me, it's an inner state. It's a way of being where you're walking around and your natural thoughts, your chatter in your head generally is when it's focusing on yourself, very positive. It's seeing the best about yourself and wanting the best for yourself and looking for the best for yourself and watching out for the best for yourself. Because that's what you would do if you
Yeah.
Really. So it's a state of being.
And one practical, it's the answer, asking oneself a question and answering it on a daily basis that I thought was interesting. If I truly loved myself, what would I do? And that is a kind of guiding light for all actions and decisions.
Yeah, it was a question I came up with myself when I first came into practice, was interacting with people. I still found myself like getting pulled into their dramas or like getting pulled into a lot of stuff. We all live in the world. And I found myself, I was like, how do I pull myself back from it? So I came up with this question, and the most important part of the question is actually the if. Because if you said, because I love myself, what would I do? Your mind will say, well, dumbass, you don't love yourself. Or you're not good enough, whatever, right? So it's a theoretical question. If I love myself, you're in any situation, if I love myself, what would I do? So anyone can answer. The mind will not fight the theoretical question. It'll give you the answer. Now you know the answer. And now it's up to you to live it. And you may actually ask this question 100 times and not live it 100 times. But you're tired of knowing the answer, not living it, and you will start living the answer. And that's where transformation will happen. It's very simple. This was part of it. This was actually in the latter end. where, so where I started just giving myself these things. So when I was in the world and I was faced with choices, and you naturally fall into, just old patterns and behaviors, it's like in that moment, ask yourself. And, sometimes I consciously chose the opposite, but I was being honest with myself, and you know what? The best way to live with yourself is be honest with yourself in your mind. No one's eavesdropping. The NSA hasn't figured out how to listen to the inside of your head. Okay. Like, even the iPhone can't get in there. If you can be honest with yourself inside your head, there's a true freedom in that. And so I was being honest with myself when I wasn't. And eventually it was like, okay, I'm tired of being this guy who's not doing what he knows is to be true. So you just start doing it. But it really requires being honest with yourself.
How do you catch yourself? How do you keep yourself honest when you catch yourself when you might be telling yourself, some fibs, some white lies, or just kind of approaching the truth but taking a detour right as you're about to find it? Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people.
It's a practice. All these things are a practice. It's like the mental work. It's like you don't go and take a meditation course and then you're done for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Ever notice monks, like they meditate every day, hours a day? You'd think they would have gotten at a certain point. No, right? Right? So anything that's inner work is a practice. And that's what we forget. Look, I went to the gym today. I'm going to have make myself a nice smoothie, the protein and greens and all this. We do all this stuff to take care of our outer self. We don't think twice about it. You tell your friends you're working out, they'll all be like, good for you, Mm-hmm. But how much of our time do we spend working on our inner self? And that's what runs the entire show. It runs the entire show. You work on your inner self, your outer self naturally gets better. You start being more honest with yourself. And so the love yourself practice for me, I realized later on, was literally a Trojan horse to make myself better on the inside. Mm-hmm. And that's actually become my journey deeper and deeper, to just be better on the inside. Because look, we're till our dying moment, that's who you got, is you.
Mm-hmm. You'll always be with yourself.
You're always with yourself, but you can make that better. I promise you, your external will get better because your actions will get better. But there's also something I've learned, and this, we can get into it gets a little woo-woo, but I've really noticed that anytime I'm really, and I get a lot of people telling me the same thing, I notice that I'm really being internally, I don't like the word positive, but really being good inside. My external stuff to reflect it without me having to do anything. So I don't know. One can go in a deep, conversation on nature and reality, but all I can tell you is I've learned this to be true. Your outside is inside. Your outside reflects your inside. It's not instantaneous, like you say, if you think something and something happens, but you notice after a while, reality just starts to shift and become way more pleasant for you.
And a lot of people, there seems to be a broader consciousness around internal work. It's why a lot more people have turned to meditation over the course of the last decade, and are trying to find more outlets for at least the notion of internal improvement. Yet simultaneously, it's not working for everybody, and that raises some interesting questions. And it was a tweet that I really wanted to discuss with you. So someone named Molly Mielk, I believe, and her tweet was, "I increasingly think there's intense cruelty to shilling self-care as the solution for people who are clearly craving purpose." And I think it's an interesting concern about where people may be taking a less practical approach towards internal work, towards self-love, and where they're finding it to be hollow when they do the way for them to feel happier, more engaged, and break some of those mental loops is having purpose and things that they can apply themselves to. I don't know. I just think there's a lot to unwrap in that tweet, and the balance, and if there is tension or any hostility between the notion of self-care as a crutch, as an avoidance, or maybe a distraction from purpose.
I think that's a nice tweet, but I think that there's a lot of BS in it. Purpose. First of all, let's define purpose. In our Western civilization, we think of purpose as my job, my career, what I put in the world. Mm-hmm. You're in you're in a shitty situation. You're a single mom raising 5 kids. What's your purpose? Your kids. You're busy putting food on the table. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have purpose. They don't just sit around defining it. They're not living in Maslow's top of the pyramid. Okay. Sure. It's a nice tweet. but it doesn't reflect humanity. Yeah, we're all better when we have purpose, but I'll tell you, I've been on purpose at times. I know a lot of people on purpose, but their minds are a shit show and they're miserable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't talk about self-care. I'm not even much of a believer in self-care. What I'm a believer in, what shifts my inside, what makes my inside better. That'll help anything, whether you're doing purpose or not purpose or whatever. It's really, and love is the fundamental, it's the God particle. It is a fundamental thing that we all understand, that we all know how to feel. We can all even trick ourselves into feeling. That's what makes it special. That's what it's not self-care. It's not positivity. I never talk about positivity. It's not about, beating negative thoughts, all of that. I just go to the core, which is what saved me, and which is what I've realized. You go to the core. As a writer, you go to the core of the truth. Same thing here. I think a lot of self-care gets caught up in a long, see, my language is circle jerk. Just people doing 50 different things, feeling, but not making any progress, maybe you're making a little progress, whatever. No. If you're going to do something, it's got to transform your life. If it doesn't transform your life, you're doing the wrong thing. That's simple. If you're in a workout program that doesn't get you insanely fit, drop it, find a better one. If you're in a diet that doesn't get you insanely fit, drop it, do another one. If you're in an internal program that doesn't get you internally awesome inside, drop it and do another one. Go for the core. I think a lot of self-care, there's too many programs and too many gurus and too many YouTube coaches and too many people selling everything. Everybody's selling something to everyone, right? Love is something we don't need to be sold. We don't need to be taught. I figure out myself, I'm sure, and I've looked, a lot of people have figured this out. I just keep it with my own my simple practice. Because of the life I've lived, I have a certain, maybe a broader approach to myself and also what I've learned and what I've seen in my life. But, and I think that's one of the reasons it works. But, it's a good tweet. That's the problem with Twitter. You read something, right? It's like, oh, that's good. And you like, and you move on.
Yeah,
Did it change your life? Did it change your life? Are you a week later, is your life better for it? If not, stop it. Let it go. In fact, I find, I took 9 months off from Twitter, finally came back on kicking and screaming because a lot of my readers want me back on. And I'm like, I have 100 tweets I could do a day, but I really struggle because I'm like, most of this, they sound good. I know I'm going to get a lot of retweets and a lot of likes, but it's really like, what is something core that if someone really listened to it and applied it, their life would change, So I'm sure the woman who wrote the tweet is a wonderful person and meant well, but Twitter's full of that. But if Twitter's full of that, and everyone on Twitter right now should be enlightened if that was the case, if these things really worked.
Sure. Yeah.
There's enough of those, right?
There is a lot of faint wisdom and faint praise
or Instagram.
Floating around.
Like, when was the last time an Instagram quote transformed your life? It's transform your life. Yeah. If it didn't, it doesn't matter. That's my rule.
Would you say that like may even be the enemy of love?
I don't even know what that means.
That, as you said before, if this workout program, if something, it is not the most animated, it does not animate you, the best workout program you've ever been on, right? If there's something
I'm not saying animate, I'm talking about results.
Okay.
I'm talking about results. Is it giving you the best results? If it's not, drop it, get another one. This diet give you the best results, drop another one. Internal program, drop it, get another one. Self-care, if it makes you slightly better, not good enough. Go for something else. But life is finite, man. You're talking to a guy who died in a hospital, was brought back. Life, and you don't know when you're gonna go. Okay, we all think we have time, and I thought I had time, and when I was going, I was like, had to come to terms with it within milliseconds.
Stared her right in the face.
And it was horrible. It was absolutely, absolutely horrible. It was severe trauma. It was absolutely horrible. Let me tell you, life is finite. Don't waste your time fucking around trying to find the right program. Be very, very, it's your life, it's your mind. There's nothing more important, because who you become and who you are is how you affect the world, how you make everyone around you better. So when it comes to self-improvement, be merciless and go for only things that transform you. And if it's,
Yeah, I guess maybe it's taking an extra beat of consciousness to think about whether or not something that you might like, do you actually love it? Is there an even deeper appreciation and deeper feeling that, it might be so long since you've been in romantic love. And since you mentioned that in describing the feeling of love in your book, that the feeling that you see with a child, because a child knows that it is loved by its parent, and that people may have been, it may be so long since somebody's felt love that things that they think they love, it's really just kind of a passing amusement or something that they have a mild connection to, and to really be conscious of what you do truly love and gives you that deeper joy.
Yeah, romantic love is tough, but I'll even speak from experience. So much of romantic love is actually not love. It's more like craving.
Mm-hmm.
You must love me this way so I can feel, you must love me this way so I can feel that way about myself.
It is external.
Yeah. Right. Versus, if you really love yourself and you don't need someone to validate you, watch them throw themselves at you.
Yeah. No,
that,
once again, the emergent qualities and things that kind of, when we talk about the law of attraction and just kind of that mystical quality of once you've got the inner game right and the external results seem to follow. And then the flip side, and you had some very interesting thoughts on what is very much the flip side to love, which is fear, and the way that you kind of your view towards processing fear, in that you describe fear as the proper signal, and that fear, you should be guiding yourself towards the things that you fear, is probably a proper signal for the direction you should be going. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you see that emotion and processing it.
Because I think too much because the modern society we live in, fear is so. We use fear as something to run away from, where often beyond fear is where our greatest magic lies. So I try to learn, if I'm fear of, let's take something like public speaking. When I started doing public speaking, I was freaking terrified.
Mm-hmm.
I was terrified. I remember the first talk I gave, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself for 5 minutes, what the hell are you doing? And they went on stage and I started talking about, hey, by the way, I'm just gonna be honest with you, the first time talking on stage and I'm terrified, and let's just have this journey. Let's see what happens. Sure. And it being a really, really it's a talk that's very, very well known on YouTube now. It's but I went past that fear, and that's where I found the magic was going past it. That's an example, and anything. If we let fear stop us, I don't know any successful entrepreneur would be successful. I don't know any. I think I read somewhere Bruce Springsteen, or which very successful musician that we all would say, oh my God, that guy is like a musical legend. I think throws up every time before he goes on stage.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I think it's him or someone else, but someone really well known. It's so the fear, you got to go beyond it, because that's where the magic is. Right. Same thing in loving yourself. Maybe, I get emails from people all these fears are coming out. I'm good. That shows you're on the path.
Mm-hmm.
It's your old self fighting it.
Yeah.
You think the old self is just going to let itself, let you just layer these new patterns, and it's going to say, who do you think you are and all that? That's normal. Go beyond it. Keep going. Keep going. That's the only thing. Keep going.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating in creating those new neural pathways and also emotional pathways, because you haven't had to experience, that type of emotional discomfort while encountering the possibility of a new reality.
Yeah, even in Buddhism, I've studied with the Bon, who are the mystics of Tibetan Buddhism, and I was one of the very few Westerners who got to train with them, and they talk about how when you get to some place, in certain places in your mind, because their practice are all about enlightenment, and when you get to that point. That's just the mind. Keep going. Keep going. You get here, you think, oh my God, this is awesome. Keep going. Keep going. I think it's the same with fear. Obviously, you're parked at the edge of a cliff and your fear is saying, don't press on the gas, don't press on the gas. But I think what I found is overall, it's been a very good maxim to live by. If it scares me, there's magic on the other side. Really consider it. Yeah.
Another principle in which you had kind of a counterintuitive view was the notion of self-belief. And you said self-belief is actually not that important, because, hey, if you have to wait around till you believe you can do something, you might be waiting forever. You might have to start before you have that self-belief.
I've seen that in every great entrepreneur. Look, I come from Silicon Valley. I run a venture capital firm. Trust me, I know some very, very successful people everyone knows about, everyone's heard of. I know them very well. And I know, we share innermost thoughts and feelings. And they were just as scared, if not more. In fact, they're probably more scared, right? And they didn't have the belief, but by doing it, You don't get belief by sitting there and trying to get self-belief. You get belief by having done something. That's how you get self-belief. It comes to the path of action.
Because there's
So
no
yeah,
in terms of embodying something and changing your state and actually the process, the functional way of improvement, your inner wiring. I mean, there's just no replacement for the feeling of encountering that challenge and in times succeeding, or at least in a more healthy way, processing your failure and having done it.
yeah. I mean, I don't see the point in trying to. It's like you can spend an entire life trying to psych yourself or try to figure out all the reasons why you aren't a certain way, whatever. You can just do it and get better through the process. I'm a fan of do it, and the process of doing it will make you better.
There is no substitute for action. And then another point that you've hammered on in terms of functionally how you work and work most efficiently is interesting. Your process of writing and working through, it's called the Pomodoro method, where you batch work together, you organize in 25-minute kind of sprints. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your kind of functional approach to work.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite productivity method because it's so simple. And the guy who came up with he called it Pomodoro method because he had a kitchen timer that looked like a tomato, and he was Italian, so he called it Pomodoro method. And he just set it for 25 minutes or 20 minutes, I forget, but I usually do 25-minute bursts. And you set it for 25 minutes and you pick a task and you only focus on that task. It could be email, it could be work, writing, research, but you only do that and nothing else. Nothing else. Phone rings, you don't pick it up. You're just on that. You don't say, oh, maybe I need to check this on the internet. No. That can be a separate task. And you're done. You take a 5-minute break. Then you do another, and I call them basically sprints. You do another sprint. And I think his thing is after 3, you take like a half-hour break. Mm-hmm. So what I found for myself is I'll do like maybe 20, 25-minute sprints. And sometimes you're in so much in the groove, I'll just skip the break and start the next sprint. Mm-hmm. And the next sprint, you're just using my iPhone timer. And you get so much done when you just like focus. One thing we all have lost in the modern day is focus. And what this brings you back is the focus to the task at hand. And it's amazing how much you can get done if you just focus on the task at hand. I use it for our emails. I'll batch. I hate emails. Like I get so many, right? So I'll just 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, this 20 minutes gonna suck. Go. And it's just like plow through them, right? And just when it's done, it's out the way. So it's a great way to do this stuff.
Yeah, you can wade through that morass for 25 minutes and get it off the books real quick. And turning to your professional life, if you will, and your involvement in Silicon Valley in the startup world, interesting period right now. As you've commented on as well. A lot of people who began or entered the startup world during this last cycle, which seems to have ended over the last 6 months, now through 3 downturns, right at the turn of the millennium, 2008, 2009, and now this one. What's your outlook for how this downturn, coming after a period of extensive low interest rates and some pretty frothy times in the startup world and the digital world, what are you seeing that is has continuity, is similar to the downturns you've experienced before, and where this might deviate, might be different?
Are you talking about crypto, or are you talking about tech startups?
I would say more tech startups specifically here.
Then there's no effect. They're doing great. In fact, I have no lack for deals I'm looking at. In fact, but look, the best entrepreneurs are busy working. They don't look at market conditions. I mean, like a lot of the best stuff is built in recessions.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the greatest companies that were built in tech, they were all started in recessions, right? It doesn't matter because, in fact, as an investor, it's even better because a lot of the people who are like what I call fair weather entrepreneurs, when it's a hot market and think, oh, Uber is hot, so I'll start Uber for dishwashing. I'll start Uber. You'd be amazed the stuff I've seen from people, right?
Yeah.
And versus, people just care about something and want to solve that problem. They'll do whatever, and there'll always be money for those people. Mm-hmm. Okay. And also as an investor, so now I have like a little bit less crap to wade through to find the great deals. 1, and 2, the prices are a little bit more reasonable. They're still not fully reasonable.
Repricing.
Yeah. So as an investor, it's great. In fact, I'm like, I like it. And honestly, I think entrepreneurs should too, because they have less competition from fair weather entrepreneurs. Now it's like it's the real teams.
Yeah, and a
Okay.
lot less pressure to do take distorted paths and chase growth at all costs, and really instead refocus and nail down on building a profitable business at the right pace.
Depends on the product. Certain
Mhm.
products are never meant to be profitable. Like most social
Interesting
stuff.
consideration. You think none of the social platforms are necessarily intended for profitability?
No, they're not. They're not. They're meant to usually be swallowed by a bigger company that can then apply it to their user base, and boom, you go. Like um, that's most social apps. That's the route they take.
Hmm.
Instagram, right? It was swallowed up by Facebook, which then inhaled it and spat out all its users. So Instagram was a true threat to Facebook. Facebook hadn't bought it. It would have been it would have taken a lot of market share from Facebook. And I'm sure they would have done money, but not Facebook level money, like as far as income goes, right? And so they've been able to focus on user experience more so than monetizing, because there's a bazillion ways they can monetize. But when you're part of a bigger company like that, you monetize, but not like every which way whatsoever. Yeah, most
Sure.
social products aren't meant to, honestly, find enough. I'm not looking at EBITDA results on a social platform. If I am, I'm
Hmm.
in the wrong business. I'm looking for like 1,000x return. And you
Yeah.
only get that if they IPO or they get sold to a big company that can then take that product and they have a billion users that they can just plow in and bake into their own. But
And so
social is such a small part of tech startups. It's such a small part.
it just occupies a lot more mind share because it's media friendly and it's stuff that more people use.
Yeah, but it's such a most social stuff. I would say more than anything in tech fail, because
Hmm.
it's all based on users and retention, and users creating your content and so forth. The social is actually what the hardest thing to pull in. Whereas if you do a SaaS business, that's simple. Sales, you create a product, you have a sales pipeline, you get biz dev guys, you go out, you sell, lather, rinse, repeat, right? Or you like do marketing and online marketing. You spend $1, you make $1.10, lather, rinse, repeat. Those are way easier than doing social. Where that's a hit-driven business.
Yeah.
If you don't have a hit, it's a zero.
Yeah, you got to find some of that magic somehow in social. What sectors are interesting you right now?
Well, I'm always interested in crypto, because crypto is the evolution of tech.
Hmm.
But that's the way I look at it. I don't look at it like a lot of people do. I don't look at it as the savior of mankind or anything like that. It's the evolution of tech, and there's parts of it that are going to be great for humanity, parts of it that are just outright scams.
Yeah.
I stay away from the outright scams, and I invest in projects early or platforms early that I think are actually creating something valuable. Um, there's a lot happening right now, but the appetite is very low. Like, I just invested in like a stablecoin project, which is like the last thing you want to invest in right now. The last thing, which is why I invested in it, because the founders are so sharp. I'm
Hmm.
like, look, there's still a need for a stable coin across the world that's not pegged to fiat currency. That's
Hmm.
not one-on-one held in reserve to fiat currency.
Well, then what makes it stable?
Algorithmically, and like all the levers and pulleys that they do, and there's still going to be a need for that. Now, right now, the demand for it is zero, but eventually it's going to come back up, and whoever
Hmm.
pulls it off is going to be very, very rich. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at that thesis, and I'm thinking, okay, who are the best teams? And basically expecting to lose my money in pretty much all of them. But if I hit
Hmm.
that one, I'm doing just fine.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Imagine
that's
so.
that's the venture game.
Are you seeing a lot of similarities from what's going on right now with crypto to the .com and e-com boom bust around the turn of the millennium, and something being overhyped in the short term, being properly hyped in the long term, and then in response to that bust, the bursting of a short-term bubble, a lot of people overlearning the lessons. They overlearn the lessons of some of these failures, like the Luna failure around stable coins, or other aspects of the crypto world that might have been a little too heavily reliant on financial speculation as opposed to functionality. And it seems like everyone's exaggerated exuberance on the upside and exaggerated pessimism on the downside.
Yeah, that's just markets in general.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
is it equivalent to .com boom? Originally, like maybe early on, I would have said yes, but no. I mean,
Hmm.
crypto is so global. Like anyone, any 10-year-old with a laptop can be on there investing in crypto projects. You
Yeah.
don't have that in the .com boom. You still had to go through a broker and all that. It was a different audience. It was a different. Um, it's It's completely different because the world is connected in a way that we weren't in the first .com boom. So
Yeah.
what's available, what's possible now in crypto is they couldn't even have dreamt about the .com boom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's much bigger in scale as far as the ups and the downs. But as you said, over time, you have things that are built that stand the test of time and become incredibly valuable. What they are remains to be seen. I mean, we all know, okay, Bitcoin's the gold standard. No one's doubting that. And then the rest, people say eat. Okay. Outside of that, it's all fair game,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be fair game for a long time.
How does one become a shrewd observer of the app relevant projects in the crypto world about who's building what, and try to, if you are someone who is interested in this world, it's not necessarily building themselves, but believes it is it is the next phase of a digitized society. What's your guidance and recommendations on how to be more educated and a shrewd observer of these things?
There's a lot of stuff, on YouTube and podcasts available that you can follow. I would say, okay, if you can, only listen to people who are not selling you anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's it. If you're trying to figure out who do I pay attention in crypto, if they're trying to sell you something, if they're like own a chunk of that project, don't listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
They're biased. They make money if you buy, right? Yeah. And they dump on you. I mean, but podcasts. Anytime I find someone smart in crypto, first thing I do is I just do a Google search. I put their name in podcast and see if they've been on a podcast episode. Mm-hmm. And I'll go listen. I get to basically I meet someone smart, and then if I find they did a podcast episode, I basically get to listen to the innermost thoughts on a subject that I want to learn about.
Right.
I mean, this is better than any MBA, any education you could ever get. It's that simple. Take their name, someone you find smart, whatever. Say, you know what? Put their name in podcast. If they've been on podcast, they're there to share. They're there to answer questions. Go learn from that.
And it was interesting your thoughts on on podcasting as a medium, because I was looking at at your newsletter around when you decided to reboot your podcast in 2020, that you had some hesitation about the podcast space, and that it was because it's so saturated. Seems like mm-hmm. alpha's harder to find, but then in getting past that, you do get access to so many amazing minds, just like you provided access to the great conversations you had with people like Alan. What we're trying to do here today. What are your thoughts on you obviously just gave them, but and looking back on some of your hesitation about doing your own podcast, what are your thoughts on podcasting as a medium?
I mean, I still have hesitations on it. I haven't done it in a year. I was like, after a while, I was like, all right, but what am I doing that's so special and so different, right? And I stopped until I figured that out. I don't want to do it. But I think it really is to be, the best thing we can do is we can be strategic in our growth, and then in that, then we have to be strategic with the ones we want to learn from for our growth. So if you find someone you think, oh, I want to learn from this person, literally just go look at what podcast they'll be on, and don't be wedded to any particular podcast. But every once in a while, you'll find someone who's just pure magic, and you want to listen to everything they've ever said, like Andrew
mm-hmm.
Huberman on health. That guy is the top guy on health, period. I mean, he's a neuroscientist out of Stanford, and his some of his episodes he does is just him doing an episode. They are master classes, like true master classes in your health. And then the guests he'll have, whatever. But I don't listen to every episode he has done. I go and listen to what I'm interested in. But then that's the same thing, I'll just literally, if I find someone interesting enough, I want to learn from. Basically, I'm like, do I want to learn from this person? Yes. Put the name, podcast, go find an episode or two, listen to them. I learn from someone. Learn from someone who's way smarter than me in something that I'm interested in. Right? Like right now, if anyone wants to get into crypto, there's so much information out there, so much garbage. I would just do this. I would just start picks, go to Twitter, follow some of their really smart accounts, and then see who do they follow, who do they listen to. When it comes to Bitcoin, the only person I would listen to is Willy
mm-hmm.
Woo. Right? He's a guy in New Zealand. He's brilliant on Bitcoin. He's also a friend of mine, but we actually met a few years ago, I think in Bali, and randomly we ended up talking for 12 hours straight. Because I approached from the venture perspective, he approached from as a trader, but also someone who's been Bitcoin much longer than I have. And it was we were both learning from each other. It was just one of the best conversations I've had. We literally talked for 12 hours. We just met for dinner. We spent all night talking. And he's brilliant. So if you find those people, and then if I want to know what's happening in Bitcoin, I don't sit there thinking, gee, I wonder what's going to happen Bitcoin tomorrow. I'm gonna say, Willie's way smarter than me. I want to know what Willie thinks, and I will go find his latest podcast episode because I'm sure someone's asked him that.
Yeah, no, incredible alpha to be gleaned from people like that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think people, a lot, obviously the tenor around Bitcoin, in the general marketplace, a little negative right now, but I think people are still underestimating how much amazing stuff is being done, utilizing the chain and what the potential of this is. So look forward to looking at, listening to some of Willie's materials.
One thing on crypto, I would just want to add, like, look, fundamentally in the end, you got to ask yourself, do I think it's going to be around
Yeah.
or not? If you think it's going to be around, this thing is the future of tech.
Mm-hmm.
You better learn, because this is also the future of money. And this is also a way to make a lot of money and also lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
Let me just be honest, right? But it's not something you want to disregard if you think it's going to be around. It's like the internet. If you think, in 2002, 2004, you sat down and thought, you know what, I think this internet thing's going to stick around. You should have gotten in and started learning about the internet and companies building on there, whatever, and I bet you would have gotten rich.
Yeah, you if you overlearn too many lessons from pets.com, you missed Amazon.
Right. So you start thinking of the broader thing. Build this thing. You don't think, oh, well, pets.com failed, so internet is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No. So will the internet ever be around? Will it be bigger and bigger in the future? Then you better dedicate. If you want to learn, if you want to make money, you want to start dedicating some of your time to that field. I feel that way about crypto.
Yeah, it's going to be a painful next decade or two for the people who dismiss it. I mean, I'm looking at just the pure the intellectual capital that is investing in the space, trying to figure it out. I was like, man, if this is not a thing, got a lot of smart people who miss the target. I mean, I just find it hard to believe. I think Stanley Druckenmiller, mentioned the way that we've been scouting investments for a quarter century now is looking at what all the smartest engineering students from Stanford, the Ivies, and Caltech and MIT are going into, and they're just overwhelmingly going into crypto right now. I was like, okay, I'm sure some of this is chasing a quick buck, but a lot of it isn't. And I mean, you've got a lot of young people essentially throwing their youth away if blockchain and the crypto world's just simply a myth that was an impact of loose monetary policies during the 2010s. I mean,
well, they would have otherwise gone to Wall Street, made hedge funds billions. So
right.
Now they're going in and doing this, and they're creating something new. That the best way to make money, and also the easiest way to lose money, is to get in something when it's new. That's when it's the highest risk, but the highest reward.
Yeah.
And I don't think if someone doesn't get into it, they will lose that, because look, I know people who make fortunes in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
They really should not get involved in crypto. They're going to lose their shirts. If you're good at one thing I've learned investing, figure out what your unfair advantage is. Mine is in tech.
Mm-hmm.
I know it inside out. I know a lot of the top people in the space. I have the deal flow. That's why I don't invest in real estate or anything else, or even Wall Street. I'm like, there's plenty of people on Wall Street who dedicated their lives to it,
yep,
who have the unfair advantage. I don't. But in tech, early stage, I'll win against them.
Yep.
Right. So that's why I stay in it. So figure out if you have an unfair advantage, something else to make a living, just get really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, and you want a new thing that you know is going to be the future, crypto's it, in my opinion, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. Well, a very valid opinion given your track record. And speaking of which, in terms of looking at how you've commented on some of your investments and which direction you decided to take your both your capital and your time, because one of your core value propositions is your network and helping these companies scale and grow the network and BD. I've continually seen you mention that you met a founder and you thought this person is the right person to be building this. It seems to be a bit of a feeling, an intangible quality that that you've absorbed from these founders. I'd love to hear you expand on that.
Yeah, those actually have been historically my best investments. Just like, look, I'm also a people person, so I'm not a spreadsheet person. And people are surprised by that. I'm like, look, at venture, if you're a spreadsheet, early stage venture, if you're a spreadsheet person, you're in the wrong business. It's not about spreadsheet. It's about people and what they're building and how well you think that's going to do. You have to know tech. I should know people who know tech, especially in crypto, because there's a lot of people selling a lot of fluff.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, repeat the question for me again. I was going to drift off for a second.
No worries. No worries. And you seem to prioritize the
Founders.
founder feel that you get from this person is the right person to be building this.
Yeah. Yeah, like for Zcash, I was one of the earliest investors in Zcash, and it was for my last fund. I still met Zuko, and this was before crypto was hot.
Hmm.
But he'd been in crypto before Bitcoin, and he just lived for it. And he cared so much about privacy. I was like, and he was so like charismatic about it, even though I understood only 1 out of 10 words that came out of his mouth. He was talking about, cryptography. And he was bringing in the right people. I was like, "You're the guy I want to bet." I wish I'd done a bigger bet. I was still kind of scared about
Mm.
crypto at the point, so I did a small bet. But that small bet returned really nicely for my last fund. Um, and then I've just done that. Like you meet this person who really cares about a problem and is also can rally other people around them and actually build there. That is the best bet you can get early stage.
Hmm.
Early stage is not built on EBITDA. It's not built on spreadsheets.
Absolutely.
I don't look at their projections because projections are made up numbers.
Yep.
It's hopes and
Meaningless.
dreams and prayers. It really is like projecting 5 years out on a social product. Really, like what? Like you can't. It's just so you're betting on people. In the end, a venture, at least early stage, later stage, you can do based on metrics and so forth. But early stage, Uber, Travis at Uber, Travis was the guy to build it, but no one expected Uber was going to become this worldwide juggernaut. It was called Uber Cab, Uber Taxi. But they thought, yeah, Travis can pull this up, San Francisco, a couple other cities. Okay, let's bet on it.
The amount of
Right?
regulatory hurdles that he had to get
Yeah.
past that only it
No
took
one else could have built it.
nobody else could have. Only it took a special
You know,
person to stare at those challenges and say, I'm gonna go ask for. I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission. I'm gonna go in there. We're gonna access this market and we'll figure out the regulatory challenges afterwards. Took a unique guy.
well, Travis is a fighter.
Yeah.
It took a fighter to go up against every taxi mafia in every city in the world.
Yep.
I wouldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it. I would have worn out. I said, fuck this, not worth it. Right?
Yeah.
Most people I know, they talked about, I remember this, I was at some startup event in New York City. This guy was pitching me for something. He wanted to do Uber replacement, but he's like, yeah, I only need $50 million and I can do it. That's all it is. I'm like, no, you're going to waste that 50 million. I mean, people don't understand this thing. If I just have the money, I'll do it. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. If you have the will.
It's like, it's the will, the passion, the ability to do it. In fact, like I think first-time founders overemphasize the importance of money,
Mm-hmm.
versus the best founders are like the ones that started doing it for a while. It's scrappy, they built it, and now they need the money to scale.
Mm-hmm.
People will invest in that all day long. They'll be like beating people off with a stick.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a founder, that's what you want to do. Whether it's sitting around, well, all I need is the right co-founder and the right and the right investor and the right this. No one's going to run after that.
No.
And there's a reason for it. Those don't work.
Yeah.
It's, like the best entrepreneurs are self-starters. They're passionate. They care about what they do. And they're going to do this come hell or high water. Those are the ones you want to bet on. I mean, even just as a human being, who do you want to back? Right?
Yeah. And someone who you are going to encounter infinite problems, and it's got to be the type of person that has the willingness and the capability to figure those out and keep on going. And that's a unique person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So circling back to the most interesting man in the world claim, and just as I started to read some of your materials and kind of research a bit, the person who came to mind was Ernest Hemmingway, who was arguably the most interesting man in the world of his era, and very much it was not surprising for me to realize that he was a source of inspiration for you in both living a life of adventure, exotic adventure, and his famous quote, "What is writing? It's simple. You just open up your typewriter and bleed," and about sharing a raw, vulnerable, unfiltered version of yourself is really where the value in writing comes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Hemingway as your inspiration, and what lessons you've gleaned from him.
Hemingway was the first example I came across of clear, true writing. I mean, he transformed modern American literature. And before him, it was all flowery words and this and that, but he was just like every word mattered. I remember I went to this museum in New York City once, and they had, I think, was it Farewell to Arms, a copy of it, like inscribed by him, and I had to a friend, and I only wrote something like the last paragraph he rewrote 25 times to get it right.
Mm.
That's what it takes to be a master. And even at his level, when he was writing that, right? He wrote it 25 times, rewrote it, but I'm saying word by word by word, right? To get it right. That's what it takes when you care deeply about anything. You don't just, it's like when people ask me to read a book there, I'm like, what draft is it? They look at me like, what do you mean, what draft? I'm like, is it the first draft, second draft, third? They're like, what do you mean drafts? I'm like, when you're at the fifth draft, then maybe I'll look at it. Right? You don't. If you want to keep someone as a friend, never send them your first draft. First draft, Hemingway said is excrement.
Yeah.
He was polite about it. What I learned from him was what his true commitment to his craft. People talk about how much you should drink or whatever, but when he was working a book, he wouldn't drink.
Mm-hmm.
He was so disciplined. He had a process, and he just would get in and do the work. And it was so disciplined. I learned that level of discipline, and it applies to everything in life. If you truly care about something, you have to be disciplined, right? Because it's not going to do itself for you. If you truly care of being great at something, why not? You have this life. Be great at something. Doesn't matter what. It really doesn't matter what. I recently, I'll tell you something funny. In October, I kind of came with this idea. You know what? I want to be like John Wick, the movie, right? I want to be like that character. I want to be as good as him.
Interesting ambition.
So I just came up with it. I was like, that sounds like fun, right? So I called some friends of mine, and through my network, I got connected with this former SEAL Team 6 operator named Steve Sanders. If you go to sixshooters.com, you can look him up. He's a legend in the teams. Okay, very highly decorated, been on so many deployments. He's killed a lot of very, very bad human beings, the top tier human beings who have done very bad things. He's been sent in to shoot them in the face. Okay, to put it mildly. Okay, he lives in Vegas, so I reached out to him through a mutual friend, and so he was willing to talk to me. And I said, I kind of jokingly said, look, I want to come train with you to get to John. Kind of like, I think he would have hung up on me, but it came through a mutual friend. He's like, okay, show up. Let's see how you can train. I showed up, and I started training combat shooting with him, because John Wick is incredible with guns, right? So I was like, who better learn from than a SEAL Team 6 operator who's done everything from protect the first president of Afghanistan, just him in SEAL Team 6 against all of Taliban.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, this is as legit as it gets. I started training with him, and I just kept on showing up every day with beginner mind and humble. And he's trying to just get me to get so frustrated that I would leave. He told me later, he's like, yeah, I didn't think you would show up the next day. And I kept on showing up. And you know what? I started training with him full time. And to the point where after 4 or 5 months, I am very good at combat shooting. And when I say combat shooting, it's not in a range. It's like running around, doing drills that SEAL Team 6 drills do, as they do in the SEAL teams, right? And in the process, I kind of was doing it more as a joke. I thought it'd be kind of fun. I fell in love with it.
Wow.
I fell in love with it because here's the thing. I was learning from a true master of his craft. His craft is shooting, okay? And we're lucky we have, men like that and men and women like that in the military. That's what they've chosen to do, because they're the ones who are representing us in the bad things one has to do in the military, so the civilians don't have to do those bad things, right? And he's a true master at the craft. And when you start learning the true master at anything, you start to, you all of a sudden, it's a different thing. You just realize just what goes into it. And I fell in love with it. I literally fell in love with it. And then it's like you have a master who's taken on the time to take you on as a student. You're not going to let him down. You bring your A game. Like, I'm so disciplined when I'm training with him. You literally bring your A game, and you're always giving your best, and you're always humble, because you're not going to talk shit back to a master.
Oh, no.
You're still a student. You'll always be a student, right? And also, a SEAL Team 6 guy, you're never going to talk shit back to a SEAL Team 6 guy, right? And you just don't.
Not if you have any instinct for self-preservation.
Yeah, and the best masters, like him, very humble, very no nonsense. Doesn't tell me war stories. He'll tell them sometimes as part of the training. Like, why is he making me go around, like this one drill we're doing? Like, he's teaching me how to switch and shoot from the left side or the right side, and I hated it. I'm like, why do I need to shoot from my left side? With the M4. Mm-hmm. And he showed me why the SEAL teams did. I was like, oh, and he actually, and then we've done everything from like clearing rooms with live rounds with each other, sweeping rooms. Just even the police does, the SWAT doesn't get this level of training, right? So I've got to train that with him, and in that process, when you go into any craft, and it's a craft, and this is not something I want to use on people. It's just like fun. Hey, I want to be like John Wick. And now he's like, yeah, I've seen the John Wick videos. I'll put you in a range and you'll outshoot him. Right? I was like, holy cow. Now, the confidence you build as getting better in anything is incredible. Yeah. I have a newfound confidence that I'm a confident guy, but I have a newfound confidence I never had. It's amazing, like to progress in a craft and learn from a master. I did that with Hemingway. Hemingway, I found, was a master, and you learn from the dead masters by studying their work.
Mm-hmm.
His lessons were in the book. That was the end result. How do you figure out, you learn how to get there. So there's so much growth that happens. Like, I have grown so much by studying with Steve, in so many ways I never expected as a human being. I just set out to learn a certain skill and just kind of like tongue in cheek.
Mm-hmm.
And I've become so serious about it. Screw John Wick. I want to be way better just because I want to be better at this, because now it's become like a craft I'm setting out to learn. And one day, perhaps I'll never get to his level. He's been in hundreds of firefights, literally, right? I don't want to be in one, but with my training, if I am in one, like you said, the other side is you're gonna, he said, you don't pull a gun out because otherwise you only do it if you have to kill someone. And I will never, I have zero desire to do that. But as a skill, it's made me a better human being. It's made me like much more, when you apply yourself to anything, something inside you gets better and better. And I keep forgetting that. I did not expect it to happen in this training.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say, like, in writing or anything, if you can find a master and just apply yourself to learn from it, the alchemy that happens is that you grow in ways you never could have otherwise. And you become better in ways that's way beyond that skill. Like, I have a level of confidence now that I did not have before. And it's like, I don't know what it is, but I know that if I'm walking down the street, I'm thinking, no, I wouldn't fuck with me. It's just like, I have this confidence. Yeah. And it's like, and it shows. And it's not like I'm trying to prove anything.
No, the emergent quality of attacking something or growing through something that's that complex, that also operates at that edge of human intensity. I mean, whether or not you've been in a firefight, you're learning the skills that are required. You're being trained to encounter a situation of that level of intensity. I imagine that you can't help but grow from that and be more grounded.
Yeah, and also, like, for example, with writing, when I really set out to learn the craft of writing, I spent about a decade working my ass off on it. Mm-hmm. And I grew as a person because when you grow and you get better in something, that you get this sense of confidence. Okay, forget the one with shooting guns. That's a different kind of confidence, sure, right? But you get a certain kind of confidence because you grow, you step up as a human being. And when you step up as a human being and you accomplish something and you're better, nothing can take that away from you, that sense of self. It's building a sense of self, and a sense of self doesn't come sitting around waiting for it to happen and doing self-care work. It comes from actually doing things that get better at it, that you care about getting better at it. It naturally happens.
Seems like a symbiotic relationship between loving yourself and inspiring yourself to take on those challenges, and those challenges and growing through them, increasing, and cementing one's love for thyself, because you feel better about yourself and knowing that, you can grow.
It's actually like that, I've talked to some people about confidence. I'm like, the best way to get confidence is actually just pick things and apply yourself to them and get better at them, and things that are challenging, but that you care about, so you'll stick with it.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And you'll just naturally develop a sense of confidence that you can't fake, that you carry with you. That's the real confidence. Like people like Steve, who are so accomplished, so humble, so quiet, never walking down the street. I mean, like, you see this guy, I could give you $10 million. You're like, no, I'm not going to fuck with him. No, that's okay. No, thank you. You would have to know what he is. You don't have to know who he is. You're like, I know, no, thank you. No. Because he's done this. He carries it with him, right? But it can be in anything. You can tell the confidence in a writer who's worked to get to where they are, or confidence in a carpenter, or in anything you do.
Yeah.
It's a gift, actually, in life to be. We're lucky that we can actually live in a society where we're just not literally trying to survive all the time. Mm-hmm. At least most of us, right? That even when I was in the position of life where I was just trying to survive, we still live in the Western world, and we have so much available to us. We're not like fighting tigers off, and sure, someone's not shooting, like we're not like fighting off like, armed militias off, whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, we have the time to do these things, and it's the greatest gift we can give ourselves, things that we can internally and externally, where we improve ourselves.
A beautiful message that I think a lot of us need to be more conscious of right now, and kind of understanding, having been released from material deprivation, that we do have the time and the ability to go and pursue some of these, pursue excellence, and these things that might at first seem just like kind of casual leisure instances, but really do present the opportunity for enormous personal growth. And Kamal,
Well said.
Thank you very much. And I cannot thank you enough for coming on and giving us this blueprint on how to approach that expertise, how to approach and pursue that deeper internal grounding and more primitive understanding of ourselves, encountering facing our fears, our own truths, and growing from them. So appreciate your work so much and the many lives it has transformed, and the wisdom and knowledge that you've been willing to share with us today. And once you're back from Las Vegas and Mr. Loeb is back from his travels, he wanted me to kind of a blood commitment to getting together and discussing this stuff in person. So thank you once again so much for joining us. And if you could let everybody know where to find you on the internet or your other materials.
Honestly, I'm very lazy on social, but if you just Google me, Kamal Ravikant, you'll find whatever I'm doing. I took a year off from Instagram, 9 months off from Twitter, and finally back on Twitter. I think the best way is just my books. Go to Amazon. I promise if you don't like it, I'll double your money back if it doesn't affect your life. Like, it's HarperCollins that makes money off them, not me. I get a smaller royalty, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. But really, the work I put into Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on it. I put a year of my life, just every word matters and from my heart. And it really has helped so many people. That's what I'd like to see happen, is more people read that and apply it. I've done something really good in the world with that. The world is better because I was here.
A beautiful sentiment, and one that is very much that you're seeing in the reaction to your work so far, and even just having encountered it myself and having taken a break from personal development and self-help work, just some simplistic and straightforward messaging, and even within the last 48 hours since I've first encountered it, has really been a big boon for me. So thank you once again, and look forward to continuing this in person.
My pleasure.
I am Matt Bilinsky. Once again, you can listen and subscribe to The Prevailing Narrative on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now. Make sure to follow me on my socials at Matt Bilinsky, MattBilinsky. The Prevailing Narrative is a Cavalry audio production in association with iHeartRadio. Produced by Brandon Morgan, executive produced by Dana Brunetti and Keegan Rosenberger. For Cavalry Audio, I'm Matt Bilinsky.